How's the new one?
All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Ravi.
I have reason to believe that we'll perhaps be able to do it. Let's see. All right. Morning. Today is the Chav Zayin. We actually got halfway through. So we got to the bottom line on Chav Zayin Amud Aleph. Boy Rav Ashi. So we're talking about a case of soldiers. They took the town was under siege. The women are, especially those who are married to Kohanim, perhaps they were violated and therefore usher. So we discussed the case yesterday of if it was a hiding place and whether one woman can go ahead and ask, or every woman is kosher for the hiding place. So boy Rav Ashi, bottom line. If she says there was a hiding spot, she says, I didn't hide, but I wasn't violated. So Mahu, what is the halacha there? Miyamrinan to the page, Mali the Shakir. Do we say, why would I lie? I could have just said I was hiding. So the fact that I said I wasn't hiding, but I was taller, right? Or maybe we say, no, you know what? You already opened your mouth. You said you weren't hiding. So therefore, you're like anybody else who wasn't in a hiding spot, and therefore you're not believed. Because a woman is normally not believed just to testify, I wasn't violated, right, about herself. So what was it in this case? The person went ahead and rented a donkey, and the guy said, okay, fine, you can rent it. However, don't go in this one path, Nahar Pekud, because over there it's often there's water there and it will, cause damage and it will kill my donkey. Don't go that way. Just do me a favor, you can do it. Otherwise, it's good. And therefore, if he goes there, it's negligence, and therefore he would be responsible to pay. So they told him, the nourish, go to the other path, by Narash, where there was no water. The Azal, and what do you think he did? He went in the the place where he was not supposed to go because it was frequently water there, and the donkey died. The Rav came for a Rav Amalei. Yes, I went down the Harpkud. However, lo Havi Maya. There was no water there. No, his whole concern was there was water there, but there's no water there. So Rav, Mali the Shakir. So Rav says, okay, why would he lie? He could have just said, okay, I went to the other place and therefore I wasn't killed by water. But he didn't. He said, I went by the place you told me not to go because of the water, but there was no water there. So Mali the Shakir, he could have said he went to the path of Narash. Abai says, no, Mali the Shakir, when you say that which you say of Mali the Shakir, right? This line of reasoning to go ahead and believe the person, but it's sort of like a type of migo, right? Mali the Shakir. However, if it's against witnesses or some sort of umdira or reason to believe, that we don't say. In other words, hachi hashta, hasam vada ika edem, dika maya. Over there, right? Since there's always water, there's frequently water there. It's like witnesses testifying that there's water there. In our case, right, there's no vadai nitmes, there's only chashash. Even if she wasn't in hiding, it's only a chashash that she was violated by the incoming soldiers. So therefore, in other words, in a place where it's going against only a chashash, a concern, and not a fact, therefore, we could say Mali Shaka. So therefore, in this case of the woman, who she says, that I wasn't in the hiding spot, but, I was never violated. She is believed because it's only a chashash that even if she wasn't hiding, we're concerned that she was violated. And then we said, if there are witnesses, any sort of witnesses that she was not violated, they believe, even if it's an eved or a shivcha, some sort of maidservant. So the afilu zak, the Gemara, the afilu shivcha dida. Even if it's her own maidservant, her maidservant is believed to say that her master was not violated. By a case of a man, let's say, who was divorcing his wife. So there we say, she can't, she's not yichud with her, ella al pi edim, only with witnesses, right? The witnesses to say that nothing happened between the husband and wife, right? Because there's a problem with the get. If it was written, then they were together after the get was written. So therefore, if it was written before it was given, we have to make sure they were never had yichud together. So you have to have witnesses. Even if there's an eved or a shivcha, any sort of witness can testify. Chutz me shivchasa mipnei shalibo gas b'shivchasa. except for her own shifcha. Her own shifcha is not believed to say, yes, my master, Mrs. Stein, right? She was with her husband, but nothing happened. She's not believed because Mrs. Stein, pays her paycheck and all that. And, she's owned by her. So Takasha, we just said by our case that even her own shifcha is believed to say that when there was a visiting troops that she was not violated, and yet over here her own shifcha is not, her own maidservant is not believed to say that her employer or the woman she works for was not with her soon-to-be ex-husband. So first teretz, we have three teretz, and Rapapi says no. In the case of shvuya, a captive, then we are more mekel, because it's only a concern, and therefore more mekel, we can even believe her own maidservant. Papa Amar ha b'shifcha dida ha b'shifcha dide. Right, in the case of her shifcha, that's not believed. That's the case of there. But if it was his shifcha, now it was her husband's, then he is believed. So therefore, even if her husband's shifcha says that she was not violated by the troops, then he was believed. The shifcha dida, however, shifcha olam hamna, right? So her own shifcha is not believed. Haktani, it says ein adam eid al asmo. A person just can't be believed with visiting troops on themselves. Shifcha dida mahamna, but it sounds like her own shifcha would be believed. So the answer is no. Shivchasa nami katzma dami. Her shivcha is like her, right? So her shivcha is like her. Therefore, we say it's the same thing. And Rav Ashi says. So here's the third teretz. Ha v'ha b'shivcha dida. Really, it's her own shivcha. The shivcha michza chazia b'shatzka. So what does the shivcha do? She sees her master and she stays quiet. So Hassam over there in the case of the woman getting divorced, when the shivcha sees something, then she's silent. She's quiet. So therefore, her staying silent, right, is not believed. Why? Because
she's hiding.
Because the assumption is, right, her staying silent means that she didn't testify that they were together. So therefore, that, in other words, that in that case, the shtika works that way to go ahead and permit, right? So her being quiet would permit them. No, she's not saying that they were together, so her quiet would be permitting, and therefore the shivcha is not believed. However, hacha, the shtikasa, israsa, mehemna. But in our case, the quiet, right, would answer her, right? So her being quiet would answer her by the visiting troops. If she doesn't speak up, she says quiet, then she's normally considered to be usher because there's a chashash, but therefore, if she does speak up, that means she's mutter. So by the fact that she's coming forth and saying she was not violated, therefore she should be believed. So Gemara says, Hashanami is. So you're talking about she's scared, so not that she doesn't say anything. So Hashanami, Asim Shakra. So, okay, if she's scared, so just because the status quo in our case of scared and being quiet would make her usher, so maybe she would lie and say that nothing happened. So my answer is Tarti Lovta. She wouldn't do both. She wouldn't be speak up and lie. It's one thing for her not to speak up and say anything. But once she speaks up, she's not going to lie. Where do we see that? Kiha Demari Bar Isaac. And that was Mari Bar Isaac. Some say Chana Bar Isaac. Asa le Acha mi Beit Chuzai. He had a long lost brother who came from Beit Chuzai. And their fathers, they passed away years ago. And then the brothers were separated a long time ago since their youth. So the younger brother came to his older brother, was a very well-connected person in the community. He says, publicly, give me half of the nechasim from our father. So I don't know who you are. You don't look familiar, and I didn't grow up with you, and out of here. So also come to Rav Chizda. So he came for Rav Chizda. Shapir kamer lecha. Right? He wasn't lying because he didn't recognize you. The pasuk says, so the younger brother, right, his older brother, he recognized because he was already older when he was, when he was the younger brother was born. So he recognized him, right? Just like Yosef, he recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. Right? That Yosef left without a beard, and then he returned with a beard. He was not recognizable. So it's over here, this young child left at a young age, and then he came back years later with a beard, and so his brother didn't recognize him. So Zil, I see Sahadi, the Achvaat. Go ahead, bring witnesses that you guys are brothers, and therefore you can go ahead and split in your deceased father's assets. So they said to him, Isli Sahadi, Mistafinu Mine, the Gavra Alamu. I have witnesses, but they're scared of this guy. This guy's a mafia guy. So they don't want to testify that I'm his brother because they fear him. Samarle the D-Day. So they told the mafia brother Zil Asinu at the Lava Chichu. Okay, you, Mr. Mafia guy, go ahead, bring witnesses to say that he's not your brother. Samarle, Dina Hachi. What? This is the din? What are you doing to me? Right? The rule is he's trying to go ahead and take my assets from my deceased father. He wants half of them. So he has to bring proof. I don't have to bring proof that he can't take them. He has to bring proof that he's allowed to take them. So he says, okay, but the truth is, this is the halacha with people like you, that since people are scared to go ahead and testify against you, therefore, yes, the halacha is that you have to go ahead and bring witnesses that he is not your brother. So I over there also mishakre. So okay, let's say he's going to go ahead and bring witnesses, right? And the witnesses are going to go ahead and lie and say, okay, he's not his brother, because they're scared. See, but nevertheless, we tell them go ahead and bring witnesses. So where is tied to lively? So rather, what do we see from here? That even though one is scared, he's not going to go ahead and lie in Beis Din. If you're scared, you might have testified. But once you're testifying, you're not going to lie. So therefore, just like in that case, that if he brings witnesses, we believe them to be telling the truth. So too in our case with a maidservant, even though she's scared of her master, if she testifies that her master was not violated from the visiting troops, then she's believed. So Leba Kitanai, let's say this whole thing is machlekes. So we have one bride says this ish v'isha. So this is an edus for a man or a woman. Tinok v'tinokas avia v'ima v'achia. Right, the husband, the wife, the tinok v'tinokas avia v'ima v'achia v'achaisa. Right. Tinok v'tinokas. Little kids.
I was with you saying. I was the kid saying. I was with the.
I know. I understand that. I'm just with the next case. Avalo b'na ubita. That's what it is. Right.
No, it's a random kid.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, there it is. Right. So a child, right? So a child can go ahead and testify. Thank you. I must have got that yesterday. I forgot it today. Right. So a child can go ahead and testify. A father, a mother, a brother, a sister. They can all testify about the status of a woman that she's not violated. Avalo bina ubita, not her son or daughter, or her servants, because they're all scared of her. So it has to do with being scared. And we have another brayso in Tanidach, hakol nemanim leid chutz man chutz meimena ubala, except her and her husband. Now, everybody else, even those who are scared of her, are allowed to testify. So you see clearly it's about machlokes tonight. So the Rav Papi, Rav Ashi, who gave terutzim earlier, right? Rav Papi was the case of Shvuah or Mekil, and Rav Ashi. Also, we gave the teretz. It has to do with that should be quiet. But if she says something, you can believe her. So this is machlokes tonight. So tonight, however, the Rav Papa milema tonight. Maybe Rav Papa's teretz and Rav Papa's teretz. Just looking up was there has been shifcha dida and shifcha didei. Right, so maybe you can say milema tonight. Maybe who says machlokes tonight? So Papa kitanya dahi masikla vituma. Maybe it has to do with one is testifying. Basically, they're not coming to court to testify, right? Rather, they're just saying it's kihad the chiyas Rav Dimi Amar Rav Chanan, like that which Rav Dimi Amar Rav Chanan kartigai mishtay ma'isa balifnei Rav Yeshua ben Levi. That is, I guess, from Carthage or Kartiga, right? And the Zab, this Maisa came before Yeshua ben Levi and Barmidan. Some say Yeshua ben Levi, Mishtay Maisa. He was one who related this Maisa, Bali Fnei Rebbe. He was just mentioning in the conversation, me, my mother, we were taken captive amongst the Avik Chavim. And Yatzatzi Lisha Mayim, and when I would go out, even to go ahead and draw water, Daiti Alima, I would always have a constant contact with my mother. In order that she was not violated, like an in order to go ahead and gather wood. Daiti Alami, my mind is my mother. The Yasir Rabbi Lakuna Alpiv, and Rabbi was able to go ahead and marry her to Kuna Alpiv. So we see over there that since the son, he was testified by the mother, but he was saying it he was saying it in conversation. He wasn't saying it to Taras Edus. He wasn't coming to court and testifying. So just mentioning a conversation, that is believable, even if it's a son, even if it's a servant. But if it was coming to court, then that wouldn't be believed. So that's perhaps how Rav Papa would explain the case. Fine. Now in Mishnah. Mishnah says, Rabbi Zechariah ben Akatzav Hamoyna Zeh, Vayzoze Yod Mitach Yodi Misha Sheniknus Avodah Kechavim L'Yushalayim Bad Shiyatzar. So it says Rabbi Zechariah ben Akatzav that the person says, my goodness, right? My wife did not leave my side the entire time, from the time that the troops entered into Yerushalayim until they left. So Amrlo, never they said, Ain Adam made al Atzmo, you can't testify by yourself, and if there's no other witnesses there, then she is forbidden to you. Fine. Zok the Gemara. Satana, Viafa Piched, Yachila, Bais B'Chatzer, nevertheless, they can still go ahead and live right together, right, in the same house, in the Chatzir, in the shared Chatzir, they can live together. We're not worried that the two of them will have relations because she's now ushered to him. When she leaves the Chatzir, right, right, I guess when she's leaving, right, she leaves first before her sons. When she returns and the husband's there, then Nichnases B'sof Banel, right, then the sons come first, then she comes afterwards. So that's what they did in this case. So in the case of where we have to divorce her because she was right, because potential of being violent. So what about the halacha when it comes to the grusha? A woman gets divorced, and so can they still live in the same courtyard? Right? So do we say maybe in the case of shvuya we made him get divorced, but it's only because of a chashash of halacha lo? But over here in the case of grusha, there is an issue. A woman gets remarried, so she's usher now to her previous husband, who she wants divorced. Once she marries another man, she can't go back to her first husband. Or has no difference. So Tashma, come listen. The tiny learned Brisa, Hamagar says Yishto. One who goes ahead and divorces his wife. If she goes ahead and gets remarried, she should not go ahead and live amongst his in his neighborhood. And if he was a Kohen, a Kohen is even if she marries nobody, he's never allowed to go ahead and remarry her because she's a Grusha. Even if he's a Kohen, also should not live in the same Mavui, in the same area. Kfar Katan is a small village, and Zaya Maisa Amro Kfar Katan Nidon Teshluna. So it's the same like the same neighborhood, and therefore it's too close proximity, right? They're too familiar with one another. We're worried that perhaps we'll get back together, and therefore do not live near each other. So Gemara asks, who gets pushed out from who? So Tashma, come listen to Tanya with Leonard Brisa. He needs to put up. She gets pushed out from him. She has to find a new place and not him. But he doesn't have to leave her. But if it was her yard, then who needs to come in? Then he's gotta leave. See, let's say they owned it together. Mahu, what's halacha there? So Tashma, we just said earlier, come and listen. He needs chasmin panav. She has to go ahead and she's has to leave him. She's pushed out from him. So B'mayaskina, what's the situation there? If it's his courtyard and we say she has to move out, Pshita, that's obvious. Ve'ala, chatzir b'shalah, maybe it's her chatzir. If it's her chatzir, he's got to book out. Elav ki agavna. Rather, in this case, when they both are partners in it, she has to leave and not him. So what about Dilma Eiger Meagar? So maybe they were only renting. Maybe they didn't own it together. So nu my havila. So what's the halacha? So Tashma, come listen. Hine Hashem. So it says over there that by a man he's sent out wandering. That's the curse. Wandering is very bad for a man. So right? Wandering for a man is worse than a wandering from a woman. So therefore, we don't want the man to wander. So therefore, we tell the woman to go ahead and wander onto a new neighborhood. So Tana Rabbanan, Leiva, speaking of an ex-wife, Leiva Haimena benichse avia. Right, let's say he borrowed from the assets of her father. He has to return it. He shouldn't go ahead and meet her, right, to pay her back or deal with her. They should stay away, distance themselves from one another. Right, don't live near each other. If she gets remarried, don't live near each other. Don't have any sort of acts with one another. Some ramsheshes be also the kamaladina. Loy is the kinin loop, and if they come before us and then the plaintiff and the defendants, we don't want to hear it. We think there's some sort of monkey business going on. Rav Papa Amar, Shmuzi Meshatino Lahu, we put him in Chayrim. And Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua Amar, Negudei Nami Megdino Lahu, we give him Malchus to Rabbanan, right? There's something nonsense going on, and we don't like it. So therefore, why you two deal with each other? Therefore, they give him Malchus. And Abba Rav Nachman Tana, Ba'ava Rapsi, so we learn about Abba Rapsi, one of the smaller Masechtas, but Medvar, Mishin Skarshim, and Suin. Only if they're divorced from the Suin. That's from full marriage. That's when they're familiar with one another. That's perhaps where they were concerned that they'll get back together. Lashin Iskarshin and heirs, but if it was only heirs and only betrothal, then Nifras, the Atzma, she could even go ahead and pay herself and direct contact Shane Libo Gaspa. Because his heart doesn't desire, he was never with her. And how also the coming to Rava. One time there was a Maisa where the two people who were once engaged and got divorced came for Rava in a din. So Yasir Rava Bar Masna Kame. So he was Rava Bar was sitting there, and Uki Rava Shlucha Bensayu. And Rava actually said the shlich. He didn't want them dealing with one another because they were once engaged, and therefore he had a shliach to go in between. So it says over there, if it's an arus and a rusas, if they're just engaged, they could deal directly with each other because of Ein Libo Gaspa. So Rava said, no, I see, the way they're looking at each other, there was something there in their past, and therefore I don't trust the two, and therefore I establish a shliach. And he could argue a slightly different version. Lo uki Rava shluch bensayu. Rava did not go ahead and establish a shliach between the divorced arus and his arusa. So Malay Rava Bar Masna I dikuma shlucha bensayu. Go ahead and have a messenger go in between. So why would he have a shliach between them? We said over there that if they're just divorced from erusin, then they can deal with one another because we don't say libo gaspa. So that's only when they don't seem familiar with one another. But this case, the guy see about that. See the way they look at each other, they are very, very familiar with one another. Fine. Now Mishnah says, is it okay if we go on? Yeah, are we good? Yeah, we'll go. I'm just making sure. My stop off is not before, not after 7:45. The Mishnah says, these people are believed to testify when they're older about what they saw in their youth. He say, "Oh, this is my father's handwriting." In other words, when it comes to, let's say, a star, right? Him and somebody else are testifying about a star. And this, oh yeah, this is my father's signature. I remembered as a child. Or this is the signature of my Rebbe. Or this is the signature of my brother. Those things are remembered. I remember when this woman went out and got married as a basula. It was her first time marriage, and that was the way they got. That was the way that the woman who was married for the first time would go out. Or remember this certain child in my class. He used to go ahead and be taken out in order to go ahead and be toivel in the mikvah and eat his truma, i.e., he's testified as a kohen. Or used to go to get portions at the garan, at the granary, kohen. Or this place, this area over here was the base of pras. Base of pras is basically a field that they didn't know directly, or I guess there was a grave there. It was plowed over. So he said we were worried about certain fragments around there. So say 100 amos around. We say is the area that's tamei. So he's believed to say no. Up until here was the base of pras. Beyond that was tahor. So he's believed for that. He's also believed to say, oh yeah, we walked in Tchum Shabbos up until this tree. This was the border of Tchum Shabbos. He's not believed to say, hey, this, as a child, we always used to take this path through this guy's field. In other words, people are allowed to go through his field. Why? Because that's a case of mammon, right? Case of mammon, you can't say, okay, this field or this pathway doesn't belong to that guy because we used to walk through. There's a, it's like the Rishus HaRabim. We don't say that. Or, or they used to have different places where they would eulogize people and for the tzar, for the rabbim. And once again, he doesn't have the nemanas to basically remove property from a person to say that was basically used as public property back in the day. Therefore, to this day, it should be public property. It's not privately owned. Once again, that's the case of mammon, and he's not believed to say something that has effects on mammon. So Zak the Gemara Amarav Yeshua Vahu Sheyesh Gadol Imo. When we said earlier that he's believed to testify, right, when there's two witnesses required, then you can't have both witnesses testifying about things that they saw in their youth. It can only be something that they saw when one person is a gadol and the other person can testify when he's a gadol what he saw in his youth. Utsricha, and why do we have father, Rebbe, and brother? Utsricha, if it was just the father, because he was always around his father. About Rabbo, but his Rebbe he wasn't, so maybe he doesn't know his signature. V'yashmin and Rabbo, and if it was his Rabbi, the Rabbi, he was scared of his Rebbe. He didn't get the ruler. About Ovid, but his father wasn't scared, so therefore maybe he didn't recognize his signature. So, but nevertheless, Kamashva knew he does. If we didn't know these two, the rabbi that his father, he was around all the time, and his rabbi that he was scared of. However, his brother Delesle Lohav, but he wasn't scared of him like his rabbi. He wasn't always around his father like his brother. Amalo, I would say he's not believed by his brother's signature. Kamash Malon comes to teach you the Kavan, the Kiyum Shtaros Midrabanan, since testifying about signatures is on Derabanan, Hemidrabanan, but Derabanan. Therefore, the Rabbanan believe him in this case. And Zachar, he's believed to say that a woman, she got married for the first time, which is the minhag of the way they got married, right? Wearing this certain, veil or, hair uncovered. So my time, what's the reason? Kavan, the Rav Nashim, Basulas Nisa, Billy Milsa B'Yamo. Since, anyways, we have a majority that most women who get married are Basulas, so therefore he's believed to testify that this woman got married as a Basula. Sefer Lidful, Chum is also believed to say that a certain classmate went out to go ahead and eat this truma. Perhaps the reason why he's eating truma is because he was owned by a Kohen, but he's really an Eved. So Masai that Shubal Levi also the Adam Shilamed as Abdoi Torah, right? It's forbidden for him to go ahead and teach his Eved Torah. So therefore, since he's testifying, he was taking out of school, out of the cheder, right? So therefore, you see that he was being taught Torah. So if he was being taught Torah, he wasn't an Eved. Vatani, we're going to write, let's say the master borrows, he owes money to his slave. Or the master made his Eved Apichopis a watchman for his properties on the top of the page. Or he was reading tefillin in front of his rebbe. Or he got called up. I guess he's reading 3 psukim in the Beis HaKnesses. That is not a sign that he was freed. In other words, these things could still be done, even though it's derech kavod. A lot of these things, it doesn't mean he's no longer an Eved. He could possibly still be an Eved. So what do you see from over here? That one of them was karesh l'shep psukim. So you see, he was learning, right? So if he's learning, you see, an Eved does learn. He could still be an Eved. You just said he can't teach in Torah, and over here we say that it's not a sign of freedom. So Hasam Dikri Eved Midaita. Over there, he was reading on his own. When we say, or Shimon Levi says you shouldn't teach him, right? You shouldn't teach him like you teach your children, right? You send your children to private school, to cheder, that you don't do to your Eved. So that's what Shimon Levi is saying. So therefore, since he remembers his child from the youth, therefore he was in, he was in a Beit Sefer with him. Fine. And so Litvol, Lecha, Betruma, I made talking to the Yechubas, we're talking about Betruma de Rabban. I was only believed Neman to say this person's a Kohen when it comes to Truma de Rabban and not Truma de Raisa. Because remember, this testimony when he was a child is only accepted mid Rabban. Imana, he also used to go ahead and collect granaries. Maybe he was a slave of a Kohen, that's why he got portions. So Tanan come on, Damar, so it must be like the opinion holds, right? We don't give Truma to an Eved, Elikin Rabba Imo. In other words, you can't send a servant to the granary to go get Truma because you only give the Kohen and not the Eved. Why? Because people might think that, I saw him receive, right, Truma, he must be a Kohen. But really, he's not even a Yisrael, he's an Eved, right? The Tanya is in a brayso. En cholkim b'truma le'eved alim kin Rabbi Imai Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rabbi Yehuda, you never go ahead and give only the Eved. His master has to be with him. All right, so therefore, our Mishnah holds like this, because if we saw you got a granary, right, it must be according to Rabbi Yehuda. It says if you got from the granary alone without your master, right, then you must be a Kohen. And Rabbi Yosi Aimer Yachol Hu Sheyomer in Kohen. So no, the Eved can say in Kohen I need Tnili B'Shvil Atzmi. If I'm a Kohen, give me. In Eved Kohen, and if I'm a slave of a Kohen, then Tnili B'Shvil Rabbi. Give me, that's my Rabbi. So therefore, because of this situation, Makomo Shel Rabbi Yehuda, in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, where they only allow Kohanim themselves to get the grain, right? Hayumalim Truma leyuchsin. If people saw him receiving the Truma, then they can assume he's a Kohen to marry as a Kohen. Makomo Shel Rabbi Yosi, but in the place of Rabbi Yosi, where Avadim were allowed to go on their own to go ahead and get Truma, lo yumalim Truma leyuchsin. If they saw someone eating Truma or receiving Truma, they wouldn't elevate him to a Kohen status. And Tanya, we actually had this earlier. Amar Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yosi, says Rabbi Yosi. Miyami during my days, Loyati, I never testified about a person's yichus or eating truma. However, Pamachas Ayati Valu Eved Lakuna. One time I testified about a certain person, and because of my testimony, they elevated an Eved to Kuna. So Gemara says, Al Pialu, so I say, you think, right, that based on his testimony, right? That they elevated a Kohen to such a bad thing happened. They elevated an Evet to a Kohen. So even the animals of tzaddikim, right, that they don't eat improper things that we've seen other Gemaras, say because they're animals of tzaddikim. So tzaddikim and certainly a takala, a bad thing shouldn't happen at the hands or the cause shouldn't be the cause of such a bad thing, like an Eved marrying as if he's a Kohen. Ella, rather, big shalalos Eved lakuna alpi. Rather, I almost testified about a person, right? But in the end, it was caught. Why? What happened? So Chaz Basid Rabbi Yosi. So I saw in the place of Rabbi Yosi where Avadim get it. The Azal Basi Basid Rabbi Yehuda, and I testified in the place of Rabbi Yehuda. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda, according to him, only Kohanim got it. So since I testified, I saw this person at a granary. But in the place of Rabbi Yosi, there's no proof at all. But since he was testified in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, therefore they almost elevate to a Kohen status. But people realized, no, that was a makom where they were knowing like Rabbi Yosi, and therefore they didn't elevate him. V'shamakom was Beis Prasu, and this place is the area of Beis Pras. So my time, what's the reason? Beis Pras the Rabbanon. Beis Pras is only the Rabbanon because the Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Manapich Adam Beis Pras v'olech, right? Because over there we're worried about bone fragments, but if a person goes ahead and blows, then he's allowed to go ahead and walk through and still be considered to be tahor. Right, Rav Yehuda Barami Mishmei, Rav Yehuda Amar Beis Pras Shenidash. If it was plowed over again, Torah. It's also Torah. My time. What's the reason? Because we're only worried about if you have a bone fragment that's a sign of a barley, and it's a positive. If it wasn't plowed over, then people were trampling on it, walking on it, and therefore it's no longer there. It was basically pulverized, and therefore it would not be matami a person by walking over, and therefore it's Torah. And over here we go into Shabbos. We hold this Chum Derabanan. He's not believed to say this path used to be a public way for people to walk, and it's not this person's private property, or this place used to be a public area to have spaden, and it's not his private property. My time. And what's the reason? Right? We don't go ahead and take away people's money based upon the testimony of somebody saying that he remembers when he was younger. And Tino, because believed to say, my father told me, Mishpacha zu tahara, Mishpacha zu tameh. This Mishpacha is tahar, and this one's tameh. So Mara says, tahar v'tameh, so could I say, tahar v'tameh? El Mishpacha zu kashira, Mishpacha zu psula. This Mishpacha is kosher, good yichas, this one's bad. Shachalnu b'ktzatza shabas ploni uploni. And we ate the ktzatza from this daughter, who this woman who was a daughter of so and so family. We'll explain that in 1 minute. We used to go ahead and bring challah and matanas kuna laploni. This person, he was a kohen, the atzmo. That's only if he himself delivered it. The acher, but if somebody else delivered it, he can't say I remember someone else delivered it. But only if he delivered it, he can testify. All these he remembers from his youth when he was an Avei Kachavim, and then he converted later on, and now he wants to give testimony, or Eved, or if he was a slave and the shtacher and he was freed. Ain't that money? They're not believed. He's also not believed to say that this area was a public walkway or a place where they used to make haspedim. It's a public way. It's not this person's private. So, and Rabbi Yechi Bebrok Oimer Neman, and they are believed. So Rabbi Yechi Bebrok Ayah. So which case is he going on? If he's going on the Seifa, saying a child is believed, someone's believed to say when he was a child that this place was Rishus Harabim, Afukim Manahu. Right? We just said we don't believe someone based on his youth to go ahead and take away money. So Ella, rather, it's going Resha. It's going on the Resha, where he said the Chulani Maya of the Chavin is guy or Eveshin Nemanim. Right? So on that we said if he was a guy or an Evan, he was freed or converted, then he's not believed. And Rabbi Yechon Abruk he is believed. Why is that Maikim? If it wasn't Machlokes, Satana Kama Savar came from David Chavim who since he was on the Chavin time, he wasn't paying attention. And therefore, we don't believe him. Perhaps he was wrong. Rabbi Yechon Broka is severed now. Since he always wanted to go ahead and convert, therefore he didn't pay attention. Therefore, we would believe his testimony from his youth. And my ktsatsa, what does it mean that he's believed to say this is a ktsatsa? So the Tanna Rabbanan, ktsatsa was a ktsatsa. So echamina achin shenasa isha shenu gerisla. One of the brothers married a bad family. The woman has something mamzeris, some bad lineage in her family, and they're not happy about it. Boy b'nei mishpacha. So the family says, we don't want this. You carry the family name. Who maybe chavis maleya peiros They go ahead, they bring a barrel full of fruits into the city's town square. Right? And they break into the town square. And they say, Achenu Beis Yisrael, Shimo, my fellow Jews, listen up, townspeople. Achenu Plodi Nasa Isha Shenu Geneslo, our brother, right? Despite all of us fighting him, right? We took her on we don't want to marry her, even though she's not fit for him. We're worried that he carries a family name, his kids are going to mix up with our kids. Go ahead and take this fruit here for generations, in order that people won't confuse his kids and our kids. And this is what a tinok is believed to say. Remember from his youth that this certain woman married a guy from a bad lineage, and therefore that's one family different from the other family. So Hajalach Haisha Shenis Arbala Mazata. All right, 742. Not good. Yeah.